Mauro in Lisbon a few months ago. Right? So, hi everyone. Hola, buenas tardes. And I'm really glad to be presenting this workshop. And if you have any questions, I've pulled up. I've already shared my screen, and you can actually join. I'd like this presentation to be a bit more interactive, so it's not just very one-sided. So I'll be putting in some questions and some polls in the discussion. So, and also when you go to Slido, there should be an option for you to type in your question, and we can go ahead and answer them at the end of the presentation. So let's start. If you would like to participate in the discussion, you can go to slido.com and you can enter this code, or you can also just scan the code on your in the screen, and it should take you directly to where the polls and the Q&A are, Q&A portion are. So let's get started. So today we are going to be talking about remote work basics, which is basically the one-on-one workshop, kind of like a crash course. And what we want you to learn from this presentation are the skills needed and the knowledge needed for you to start working remotely, or at least start, from the right foot, so that you'll have the right information. You have enough information for you to get started. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to start because when you go into Google, for example, and you search for remote work or how to, find remote jobs, there's so much information available online. Sometimes it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information, you're bombarded by it, and you end up not learning anything. So right now we're going to go ahead and start to give you sort of like an introduction to this industry. As Mauro have mentioned, the digital nomad movement was just the tip of the iceberg. Remote working actually has been, this has been in practice for many years, and you don't need to travel to work remotely. You can actually work remotely and stay where you are, just like how I am. I'm actually a remote worker, and I've only lived in 2 countries, which is the Philippines, which is where I'm from, and in Portugal, in Lisbon, where I'm currently living right now. So I want to thank Nomades BA, Mauro and Facundo, for inviting me over, and also Sophia, because of these 2 institutions, these 2 organizations, this presentation was possible. They made it possible for us, right? And just a really brief introduction. I'm not going to take too long. They've already made an introduction about me. Hi, my name is June Bolneo. I'm an awkward but very passionate remote advocate. I'm originally from the Philippines. So if you have been to the Philippines, I'm from Cebu City, which is in the middle of the country. And I've moved to Portugal in 2016, and I've been living here ever since then. I have been teaching people how to find jobs online since 2012, 2013, late 2012, early 2013. And I have been sharing my knowledge ever since. I've worked with international organizations and different government organizations in different countries, like the Philippines, like Portugal, Ireland, and now in Buenos Aires, which is, it gives me great joy to be able to share my knowledge with everyone. So that's, all about me. The topics that we will be talking about today are the following. We want to go ahead and clarify what remote work is. What are the different types of remote working? What are the different setups of remote working, right? Different types of workers, actually, and different setups. Where to find remote jobs and the different platforms available online, which I think is very important. A lot of you might be curious about that. What are the skills that you need to take into account, when you want to work remotely? And then lastly, what are the things that you need to consider if you want to work remotely? Like if you really want you're serious, like this is it, I want to be a remote worker, and I want to know how I can thrive, working online, like this is going to be my career. What are the things that I should be looking out for, right? And so just a little bit of before we get started on our topic, I want to share some facts and some of the statistics when it comes to remote work. And this is what the research tells us. About 12% of the US workers are now working fully remote. And while 28.2% work flexibly or in a hybrid setup, they spend in equal parts of the days at work and in the office or in a different location. However, Upwork, one of the largest work marketplaces, predicted that by 2030, 22% of the US workforce will be working remotely. And that's about 36.2 million workers. It's a lot of workers, right? And so we've predicted, or at least based on research, Upwork has predicted that there's going to be about 36 million workers working remotely, and that's just in the US. Doesn't even consider, everywhere else in the world. Every year, Buffer actually generates a report, does a survey of everyone of people who have been working remotely, and 98% of the workers who've tried working remotely says that they would want to work part-time at least, right? So this is like this trend is not going away. It's here to stay. So you kind of wonder why companies don't want to the remote work to be normal, and there's a big push to return to the office. You might have heard of this, and it's in the news almost every day, and there's many factors in there. But on an average, a company can save about $11,000 per employee per year. There's a lot of savings of moving from an in-office setup to a fully remote company. But there's a cost, with change, and that's the cost of like changing your processes, your tools, training your managers, and then giving up real estate investment. And that's actually one of the main, reasons why there's this pushback when it comes to remote working. It's change is difficult. Now, I want to give you a little bit of data also with the Latin America, since this probably concerns you a bit more. So based on research, 38% of the companies have created a role that is working remotely. They surveyed about almost 300 executives with regards to this report, and I can share you the research that is presenting this. This is the research, and if you're curious, you can go ahead and download that. It's called the Future of Work in Latin America. So 38% of the companies that were surveyed have created remote roles, and about 73% of them are permanent. So it's like this is not going away. It is going slowly, but there is progress for sure. Now, the good news is based on another research, which I'm going to go ahead and put in here in the chat as well, about the quality of work when it comes to teleworking in Latin America. Apparently, 13% of remote workers in Argentina earn more, right, compared to the same position, but in office. It's really interesting, right? And about 39% of the companies now currently are working in a hybrid setup. So this is like the kind of like a win-win situation that they're seeing, at the moment, because companies that want to give in with the fully remote idea. And so a lot of them are moving to a hybrid setup, wherein you spend some days in the office and some days working from home. Here are the top remote roles that are in demand at the moment, surprisingly, accountants is actually in the top. And funnily enough, my accountant, I have never seen him this year, and I've only seen him twice last year. And that was because I made an effort to go and see him. And this is, it's a bit funny because it's not a traditional, not very techy position. And most of the time we have this misconception that only tech roles, or something in IT can be done remotely, but not true at all. Not true. So these are the other, the other ones: business development, copywriters, customer success representative, editors, and then you have the more techie side: engineering, marketing manager, product manager, software engineers in there. These are the top industries that are moving to remote. There's a shift in the industries. IT and computer, of course, they are the top, since it's quite easier. So we were in the first industrial revolution, we were building skyscrapers, we were building buildings and houses and like infrastructure. And this industrial revolution, the one that we are experiencing right now, we're building digital infrastructures. We're building databases. We're building platforms, softwares, websites, and everything is virtual. And that's why you see, back in the days, carpenters, contractors, everybody in masonry and manufacturing, they're all were very in demand, because we were building, our infrastructures before, the physical one. And now, since we are moving digitally, we're building our digital infrastructures, and that's why computer and IT are very much in demand. Marketing and sales, accounting, project management, medical and health, HR, and recruiting. So these are the stuff that roles that are moving, right? So I want to go ahead and run a poll for those of you who joined us online. Which industry are you working in, right? You can go ahead and write that, if you are there, you can go ahead and type it in. IT, very well, okay. Health services, great. E-learning, marketing, design, right, very well. See, okay, we are coming from everywhere, all sorts. All right, you can go ahead and keep your keep it coming. And I'm gonna go ahead and move on. This time we're gonna go ahead and start with our topic. All right, so let's begin. So what is remote work? And this might be something that you've been asking too. A lot of misconception in here, right? So the answer is remote work is a type of work arrangement. I want to highlight this part. It's a type of work arrangement where employees can work outside of a traditional office setting. And what does that mean, right? It means that it's not just working from home. It's not just working, from a cafe, from a co-working space. It's not a place, right? So remote working is the actual, setup. It's like the company is able to operate virtually, and that's why the roles, the work, the position, the tasks that the employees are doing can be done outside of the office. And so it means that if it's work from home, yes, it's working remotely, but working from home really, it doesn't necessarily equate to remote work immediately, right? So remote working from home is another, you are able to work from home because the role is remote, or you are able to do it virtually, right? But most of the time we confuse that. So now that you know what the definition of what remote work is, we'll go ahead and discuss the different types of it. And I'll explain to you why it's important for you to know this, right? So we have different types of setups. So the different types of setup, because this is a cause of frustration for most people. And when they say, I thought you said that this was remote, like, why do I need to go to the office, right? So we have different types of remote working setup. So we have remote, which is basically you don't have an office, but there's two subtypes, which is co-located, meaning you might be from the same country, you might be from the same continent, right? And then we have the fully distributed one, which is like everywhere from different time zones and all sorts of places. And then you have the other type, which is the hybrid setup or the flexible setup. And then they also claim to be remote because, of course, at some point, at some time, they are remote, they're able to work from home. And you have two types of this. You have the remote first, which is by default, you can work from home or from anywhere. And you have the option to go to the office, okay? Very important to take note of. And then you have the second part, which is remote friendly, meaning by default, you work in the office, but sometimes you can work from home. So you see the very slight difference, right? And so when a company claims that they are remote, they might be telling the truth, they are remote, but are they remote first? Like, can you say, I don't want to work from the office today, and by default, I want to work only, from my place, from my house, or from a co-working space near my, my house. And so it's important for you to know these, because when you're looking for work later, you can suss out, what the type of company it is. Like, are you remote friendly, or are you remote first? Are you a co-located remote company or a distributed? So just to give you a visual representation of what that looks like, right? So a co-located company, they are remote, no office, or maybe they do, but you're not forced to go there. They'll have just in one country because maybe they can only hire from those countries, right? Or from that country. They are legally only allowed to issue employment in that country. Whereas the fully distributed one, it doesn't matter where you are, right? They can hire from anywhere. And so those are two different things. So as I mentioned, this is something that you need to take note of. And and when you're applying and looking for companies, this is something that you want to watch out. Now you know what to find. Now, why is it so important for you to know this? And also, a lot of people are hating on companies when they say, oh, but let's just say I'm from Portugal, I'm from the Philippines, or I'm from Buenos Aires, from Argentina, why can't you hire me? Why are you only hiring in the US? And that's because in order for them to give you an employment contract, a legal and binding document, a legal and binding contract, they need to have a legal entity in the same country, right? So if they don't have a legal entity, they will not be able to issue you a contract because, they legally they can't. And there's a lot of nuances in opening up an entity. There's an upkeep, more cost, more money. It's costly for them. And so they will just choose to hire within where they can legally. However, there are some companies who are already solving this problem. Some of them are here in the screen. I'm going to show you. Remote.com, you might have heard of them, right? Deal, Boundless, Oyster. These companies are called employer of records, and they are the middleman, right? They're the third party who would hire you. Let's just say there's a US company and you are from Buenos Aires. This company really likes you, wants to hire you, but they don't have a legal entity, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to get remote.com, for example, and remote.com is going to be the one is going to hire you and give you a legal contract, because they have a legal entity in Buenos Aires, right, or in Argentina. And so, you know, with that, through that, they're able to give you an employment contract. And this is how most remote companies, you know, have been solving that employment issue. It's international, it's very nuanced. And as I mentioned, you know, don't hate on the companies when they can't hire you. It's just because, you know, maybe they don't want to take this route. It's extra cost, it's extra money, especially if they are still starting out, right? And so, yeah. Now, we've talked about this, you know, the legal employment part. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the different types of remote workers, right? So the different types of remote workers, and the reason why it's important for you to know this is that you need to decide which one you want to be, right? Because every type of, you know, a remote worker will mean you will also search for jobs in different places, right? So a remote employee is somebody who has a legal and binding contract, just like what we were talking about earlier, you know, with Deal, with remote.com and whatnot. So you have a full-time job, but it's with a company, a remote company. You don't have an office. It's just like a regular employee. You have your taxes, you have your social security, insurance, all of the benefits that is, you know, expected in an employee, but you don't have an office. A contractor or a freelancer is somebody who is an independent worker. So basically, you do this like per task or per project or per hour. You charge them, you know, individually. You charge them under your name. So when you issue an invoice, you actually issue it under your name, and you charge people by task or per hour or per project. Entrepreneurs are people who have businesses, right? And so if you want to do an online store, for example, or you want to build a business, you build a startup, these are the people under. The big difference here, right, if you need to take note of, is that, okay, so an employee has all of like the idea of stability. You have a contract, you have a fixed, not all the time, but usually you have business hours, meaning that you need to work from this time to this time. And in most cases, you only have to, you can only work with one company because you're an employee, right? It has all of the benefits of the employee and also all of the stuff that is expected of an employee. Now, a freelancer is, you have infinite, you know, options of like how many clients I want to work with, how much, you know, how many hours I want to work, and also where I want to work, right? And then an entrepreneur is more or less the same as a contractor. The big difference between a contractor and an entrepreneur is that a contractor, when you issue a receipt, an invoice, it's under your name. So you have all of the liability because you're an independent, you know, worker, right? An entrepreneur, when you issue an invoice, you're actually doing business with an entity, a business entity. So for me, for example, I have a business called Work Remote, right? And Work Remote is a company. And when I issue, you know, an invoice, you're not necessarily doing business with me. You're doing business with my company. So that's the same. You know, if you open up an online store and you create a business, when you issue an invoice, it's with the business, right? But if you are a graphic designer and you want to go ahead and design stuff for people, when you issue an invoice, you issue it under your name. So that's a big difference. Now, the reason why it's important for you to know these is that when you're working for, you know, when you're looking for employment, because you want to be a remote employee, you want to go ahead and look at job boards and, you know, remote companies who will offer full-time employment or part-time employment. You want to find employment, right? And you will be applying and sending out CVs and doing the interviews and all the process with the recruitment process for an employee. That's a different thing. When you're a contractor, you might want to go to work marketplaces where you can charge somebody per hour, or maybe do something per project. Like, I want to build your website and you pay me for it, right? Or I want to do, a marketing campaign with you, or create a video for you, right? And you pay me for that. And that's just like a one-off transaction. It's not employment. It's quite different. And lastly, the entrepreneur, of course, is you're looking for customers. You're actually not looking for a job, so to speak, right? You're not looking for employment, what I mean. And you're not necessarily looking for, to work with clients. You're working with customers. And that's a different sales funnel right there. You're looking for customers, to do business with, right? So it's important for you to know that that's different. Where you're going to be looking for work is going to be different. Now, I want to go ahead and run another question. So now that you understand the different types of remote workers, like, which one do you prefer? Do you want to be an employee, like a full-time employee or a part-time employee for a remote worker? Or do you want to be a freelancer and you just want to, work per project? Maybe you just want side hustles, right? Maybe you have a full-time job now and you just want to work, part-time on the side. Or maybe you want to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you want to build your own online store, for example. Or maybe you want to be a startup founder. Which one would you prefer? Okay, I see here a lot. Okay, right. 78% of you wants to be an employee. So you're looking for employment. Very well. Freelancer, full-time. Okay. So a lot of people answering in the chat as well. Very good. All right. We are going to go ahead and move on with the next presentation. So the question is, now that you know different types of setup and different types of remote workers, like, where in the world are the jobs, June? Like, you tell me all of these things. Like, I just want to know where they are. Right? So we have different platforms, as I mentioned, and depending on the type of work that you're looking for, you go to these platforms to look for them. Okay, so when you're looking for employment, you might want to go ahead and look at, might want to go to remote job boards and career pages. And so I actually prepared, I'm going to go ahead and put in here a link, because there's a lot of them, right? There's a link in the chat I put in for you to go. There's a list in there, a list of job boards that are all remote. Okay, I think we have like about 30 of them in there. And there's also links where the work marketplaces are. So if you're looking for full-time remote work, you might want to go to job boards like We Work Remotely, like workremote.pt. We do have a jobs board as well. You can go visit us, right? Remote, okay, EU remote jobs if you're from the from the EU, and there's a lot of them. There's a whole list of job boards that you can go ahead and check. So go and click on that link and see the list that we have. Now, if you're looking for freelance work, right, then I think you would probably have more luck looking for freelance work in work marketplaces. And work marketplaces are like Upwork and Fiverr, freelancer.com, TopTal. And these are companies who would have clients looking for, I just want somebody to translate this for me. And then they'd pay you, 100 euros or something like that, right? So if that's something that you prefer, like, I just want to work part-time, or I just want to work freelance, or maybe full-time, but just freelance work, you'd have different clients, then work marketplaces might be a better option for you to look for. In the list that I shared in there, I've also listed down some 10 places that you can go to, you know, different work marketplaces that you can visit. Now, if you are an entrepreneur, right, and then that means that you have a business, right? Then if you're looking for customers, it's much better for you to have your own website, whether that's in WordPress, whether that's in Shopify or in, you know, Wix, whichever platform you prefer. It's best that you have your own space online where you can sell stuff, right? And where you can direct your customers and push them, get traffic, so that you would be able to sell them your product or services. So instead, sure, you can go to work marketplaces and job boards, but you know, as a business, you would be more credible, you know, if you have your own store, right? And that's the reason why in the physical world, in the physical world, they usually get offices. They build, you know, storefronts. If you're a business, you have an office or a storefront. So if you're a business, you should have a space. You should have a space where you can do your business. And lastly, networking sites like LinkedIn. I see Sebastian in there. Yes. Networking sites are, you know, notorious for basically delivering also business. And just in case you don't know, based on research, about 80% of the positions are filled by networking, you know, within people's network. And that's something that is, you know, it's a no-brainer. You kind of expect, if I know this person, I would most likely, you know, recommend this person to, you know, a person I know. It's like if I know a website developer and I know that he's good, and then suddenly I find out, like, you know, another friend also needs a website, I would recommend that friend to that person, right? A very good example with this is your car mechanic, right? Or your accountant. It's like when you're trying to look for a good car mechanic, you don't normally just go and Google and like search for them, right? What do? You ask for relatives, people you know, who's your mechanic? Is he good, right? Or who's your accountant? Is he good? This is network. This is your network at work, right? And so it's always good for you to network. Like even when you don't need it at the moment, network anyways. You know, just, I know it's a bit uncomfortable, but being active in these sites can be helpful, you know, in certain times. And if you want to grow, you know, if you want to advance in your career, you would want to be networking. Like network, even if you don't need it, grow that, you know, that group of professionals that are around you. So we've talked about this and you have the link, right? And I hope everybody got that link. And I'm just going to go ahead and retype it in here just in case, you know, for those of you who just joined in. Now, the next question is, what skills do you need, right? So you know the different types of remote setup, the different types of remote workers, where to find the jobs. And now, okay, so June, how do I qualify for these jobs, right? Like I want to know if I have them, like I have what it takes. And so according to World Economic Forum, these are the top 10 skills for 2023. And by the way, this is not just for remote jobs. This is like for almost any job now. And these, if you notice it, these are transferable skills, right? And the number one there is analytical thinking. Second is creative thinking, right? I think most of you here already have a lot of these skills, right? And yeah, so I think it's best for you to take note of what the skills are needed, the top skills for 2023. But if you really want to focus on remote roles, the two things that we really value with remote hiring, and I've hired for companies, and I hired for our, for our own company as well, is communication. This is like number one. Virtual communication is like there, when it comes to what skills, transferable skills, soft skills that we need for remote working. And then how well are you with working within teams, right? How are you working with your collaboration, basically? Virtual communication and collaboration, right? And then you have the project management side of things, because of course you will be managing stuff. Like, how are you able to manage a project when your boss is not around, right? So we always ask this. There are certain questions that we ask during the interview, and but the main point is that we want to know how you collaborate with people and how you manage projects and how are you able to communicate yourself well, right? So those are the top 3 things that you want to go ahead and look into. So these are like the type of skills: cognitive, self-efficacy, management skills, technology skills, and working with others. Funnily enough, these are all of the skills that we're looking for when we're working for when we're looking for remote employees, or working with remotely. Now, what are the things that you need to consider? So, which is kind of it's important. So now you know what the skills are, and we'll talk a little bit more. What you should do next. But before we do that, we want to go ahead and talk about what are the things that you need to consider if you want to be a remote worker. Like, this is the path that I chose, June. Like, let's just say I want to be a remote employee, or I want to be a freelancer, or I want to go ahead and start my business, regardless of where you are in that fork, right? These are the things that you need to consider. 5 things. It's your routine. How are you with your routine? And that's because when you're working in an in-office setup, it's really easy for you to fall under someone else's routine, which is your company's routine. You come in, at, I don't know, 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. It doesn't matter, because they will tell you when to go to work, right? And then you will have your break, and then you will have the end of the day, and then you go home, right? So there is like that transition, from I'm at home and I'm going to work, and then I'm going to take my break, and I'm going to end the work, and I'm going home. Now, that's a routine, right? Now, when you're working from home, you don't have anyone telling you all of those things. You have to tell yourself, like, okay, I start work at this time, and that means I need to get up, take a shower, have some breakfast, and then by this time I'm going to be working, right? And so, and as funny enough, this is something that is difficult for some people. And remote work is a slow burning candle. It's it's nice and great in the first few weeks. It's like the honeymoon stage, right? It's like, oh my God, I can go ahead and work in my pajamas. I don't need to take a bath. I can go to the couch and work from there. This is amazing, right? And then you realize, like, why am I depressed? Why am I? Yeah, so you actually need to consider your routine, right? And so the second part is your environment. And I'm conscious of the time. We're going to go ahead and speed things up, right? Your environment. And that means having a dedicated space where you're supposed to work, right? A lot of people, like, they work at, they work on their couch. They work in the kitchen table. They work, on their bed. And those are like really, really unhealthy environments for you to work in, because imagine you're going to be working long hours, right? And your posture is going to be bad. You wouldn't have the same space. And also mentally, your brain actually switches on and off depending on where you are. So again, I mentioned, when you are moving or traveling to work, your mind is actually also switching on for work, right? And then when you are going to go home, that commute to home, your brain is starting to switch off from work, right? And that's like because there is a big shift in the environment. So there's a difference in there. And so that's that's why it's important for you to take note. Like, not all of us will have like a dedicated room where you can, call as your office, but even just dedicating as a corner in the house or in like, this is where I work, is going to help, it's going to do wonders for you. So make an effort to have a dedicated place where you can work. The second one is your communication. Like, how are you with, explaining yourself or delegating tasks to other people? How are you receiving, tasks, and how are you able to communicate with, your colleagues and stuff like it? This is something that is really important to consider, right? And that's why this is also in here. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, most of the companies that are hiring remotely, they will require you to speak English, and that's because you will be working in a international environment, and maybe the common language that is available and that is spoken within the team is English, right? I remember like working from, working for a UK company, and we have people in Russia, and we have people in India, we have people in the Philippines, and all sorts of languages are spoken, but English was the one that ties us together. And so that's why, this is also something to take note of. However, there are many Spanish-speaking companies who are, going remote. I can say the same thing with Portuguese as well. Brazil is also very up and coming. And so, there are some companies that are speaking like one language and working remotely as well. Something to consider. The two last ones are the processes and your tools. And this is basically when you're already working remotely, like how efficient are you? What are the tools that are you using? Like, are you using Zoom? Are you using Skype? Are you using WhatsApp? What are those tools? How well do you know them? And because this is something that will evolve eventually when you get to, work remotely. You fala português, Rodrigo? Sim, mais ou menos. So, those are the 5 things. Yes, you can use Duolingo. Now, what is next, right? So we want to go ahead and talk, like, we know all of these things now, June. That's great. That's great. And then, that's knowledge that we can use later on. But what should we do now, right? I want to know what are the next steps. So my recommendation are, here are your next steps, right? So first of all is like, decide what type of setup do you want. Do you want to work in a hybrid fashion, flexible working, where like some parts are in the office, some parts at home? Do you want to work like maybe just for a company within Buenos Aires or within Argentina? This might be something, that you would want to consider. And then decide what type of worker you want to be. Now, do you want to be an employee? Well, a lot of you actually typed in you want to be a remote employee. Do you want to be a freelancer, or do you want to open up your own business online, right? It's really important that you make this decision, because if you try to apply for everything, it's like throwing spaghetti in the wall and seeing if it sticks, right? So you need to decide and then really focus, like, okay, I just want employment, or I just want to be a contractor or a freelancer. So dedicate your time learning how to become that. And then the second step is evaluate which skills you lack. Like, well, of course, you probably already know, like, what type of, if I want to be a freelancer, I want to be like, let's just say you need to pick what type of problem you want to solve. This is like the really important part. Like, you can't just be like, I want to work remotely and then don't know what it is that you want to do, because it's just like any job. It's just like, it's virtual. So you have to decide whether you want to be, okay, let's just say you want to be a web developer, or, somebody programming, or let's just say I want to be in the education side of things. I want to teach online. I want to develop, whatever processes are in there. I want to work with data. You will have to go ahead and decide what that is. And the two last is actually kind of together. You need to upskill and reskill. If you have that gap, you have skills gap. It's like, well, you decided you want to be this, right? And there is a gap in there. Maybe you lack technical skills, right? Or you lack experience. Then you need to go ahead and acquire that, right? And lastly, don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, you can hire coaches, you can hire mentors, you can join a community. Like we with work remote, for example, we are a community of remote workers, and we want to help other remote workers find jobs online. And this is really important. And the first step is like, join the community, participate, and ask questions. Now, with regards to upskilling and reskilling, Sophie is actually here. And I'm going to promote Lifelong Learning Agency, because they do have courses that are free of charge. Some of them are long-term, some of them are short-term, and synchronous and asynchronous. And these two words you probably are, synchronous is real time and asynchronous is not real time. So maybe self-paced, something that you can do on your own, in your own time. But it's important for you to find out, like, where can you find help. And another place is you can go to workremote.pt, to our website. And we also have a course in there if you need to do like a step-by-step guide, of where to find remote jobs, and how do you do your CV, prepare for the interview, like search for all of these things, right? And so, yeah, and that's basically it. I want to know, like, as we close, I was just right on time. Right on time, which is a miracle, by the way. Usually I'm early or I'm late, but I want to know, what are your key takeaways from this webinar? What are the things that you probably you can also put in, like, what are the things I want to know more, right? And share that with us. And don't be a stranger. Go and join in. Work Remote is a social media platform for remote workers, built by remote workers, and we're on a mission to make remote work normal and accessible to everybody. So yeah, create an account, reach out to us there, talk to us, say hi, and don't be shy. I guess that is it. In maybe we can go to the questions portion, and I can see if there's any questions in there. We have 18 questions. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. I don't know if I'll be able to answer all this, so I'll try to go through them very, very quickly. Right. Do you think that it's possible to get a remote work job as first IT job? You mean like an entry level, right? I think the very first thing is you need to define what would be the IT job, because it's like an umbrella. So if you're saying like an entry level job in IT, yes, you can. There's many. There's like technical support, customer service. Like, you can also be in digital marketing and whatnot. But yeah, that's a way for you to go there. Is it possible to find remote jobs as a trainee in IT? Actually, there are internships for remote, and we post, sometimes we post them in our website as well. We have like an option there that says internship. There's internship and apprenticeship, actually, and maybe this is something that we can discuss more later. Why do they discriminate against Latin American roles by paying them less money than an EU or US remote? I love this question. Can I answer, Mauro, Sophia? Can I answer maybe just a couple more questions before I hand it over to you? Okay, so this pay gap thing is such an issue. It's like a chicken and an egg problem, right? And the way this should be explained is, when a company is paying somebody from the Silicon Valley, for example, right, and versus somebody who is in Argentina or in Buenos Aires, they're actually considering the cost of living of where you live. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, by the way, but this is how it works, right? Economics, right? The cost of living in Silicon Valley is way more expensive than it would be living in one of the countries in Latin America, right? And so when they pay you a big amount, it's supposed to pay for your house, the bills, the food that you eat, and all of the other things that you need to pay to live in that area, right? And so if that area is really expensive, they would pay you more because it's not going to go to your pocket. You're actually spending it locally. And so that's why in order for you to live there, you need to be paid more. Whereas if you are in, in a country with a low cost of living, they would also consider that in order for you to live in that country well, right, meaning you're able to pay your bills, you can send your children to school, you can go to the gym, that sort of thing, you are paid this much amount. That's how most of the companies are calculating it. However, there are also companies who are breaking the norm, disrupting this, meaning that we'll pay everybody, the same amount regardless of where you live. But this is not common just yet. As you know, remote working is not yet normal, and so things are still catching up. I wish that one day, this is going to be the case, but I don't know how long that will take there, right? And yeah, I think that's it. Are you hiring entry level or connecting people for those positions? In our jobs board, you can actually look for all sorts of jobs, entry level jobs as well. I think before you even think of like an entry level job, because this is the level of experience that you have, right? You actually need to narrow it down to a position first. Like you need to know, like, I want to work for this type of position. And that might mean that you need to work a little bit on what you want. Some people are afraid to narrow down. It's like, I just want to work like this type of work, right? And then they apply for everything. But based on experience, when you narrow things down, these are this, you can even narrow it down up to the industry. I only want to work in this industry and in this type of position, and then you look for remote companies that are hiring right there, and you would probably have more luck. And yeah, and that's it. I'm gonna hand it over to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything.
Bueno, June, muchísimas gracias. Como te he dicho hace unos días, agradezco tu tiempo y la claridad a la hora de explicarnos todos tus conocimientos. Les queremos agradecer a todas y a todas los que estuvieron hasta ahora, los que entraron un poquito después, los que estuvieron desde el principio. Ya la conocen a June, saben lo que tienen para enseñarles y para contarles. Las pueden seguir en sus redes, pueden seguir a Work Remote, donde está trabajando June. Queremos agradecerle mucho al equipo de gestión internacional con quien también estuvimos organizando esta charla. Mau, ¿querés decir algo?
Sí, agradecerte, June, agradecerles a todos y a todas, agradecerle a Natalia y a Diana que estuvieron también del otro lado traduciendo, ¿no? Como les decíamos al principio, como les decía June, lo de Nómades Digitales es la punta del iceberg. El trabajo remoto es algo que llegó para revolucionar de alguna manera la forma en la que nos relacionamos, y hay mucho para contar y mucho para hacer. Nuestra idea es poder continuar realizando este tipo de capacitaciones, este tipo de charlas, así que nos sirve mucho el feedback que nos puedan dar. Seguramente estaremos realizando más actividades en conjunto. June, es un placer volver a verte y esperamos poder seguir trabajando de manera articulada. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who attended.
Muchas gracias, nos estamos viendo pronto.